Welcome back, Fantasy Grounds family. I'm here to deliver a little presentation on story templates in their current iteration in Fantasy Grounds. So we'll just dive right into it if we can. Let me go to my presentation. All right, so before we dig in, let's talk about a little bit about terminology, callouts and references. So I'm going to refer to these terms a lot during this video, and I just want to get them right out of the way up front. So a callout is anytime you're calling data from a table. You're getting something new from a table and rolling something. And don't worry about all those little syntax down below. That's just a cheat sheet for all of the different callouts that we have. A reference is something that you've called before. With a call out, and now you're just bringing it back for usage, and those are all different ways. They kind of mingle a little bit when we talk about internal call out references, but don't worry about that for now. We'll get into that. So here's the list of everything that story templates are now able to do. And the top three are what the Fantasy Grounds had originally, and now a lot more has been added from here on out. So let's talk about what the basic usage of story templates and how you use data within them first. So let's jump into that. You've got a table callout. So here we're using table A. It's got 4 columns. So just square brackets around your table name. Simple, easy to use. And you get everything that's in that table. If you had 4 columns, it'll give you all 4 columns in a row. You can reference that. I call these the alligator brackets. You can reference that with the table name in the alligator brackets, and you'll get everything that you got on your original callout. Then there's a column callout. Now you're going to call table A, but you only want whatever's in column 3, and so you can do that with the pipe symbol in between the table name and the column that you want inside those square brackets. If you called it in this way and later referenced it with the alligator brackets, you would only get column 3. This is the basic functionality of story templates, and it has its limitations, but it's also really powerful, and it's what's made story templates so great up until this point. But you either get all the columns, or you get a single column with no relation to any of the others. Which can cause continuity issues. And so that's why we've got some new things out now for story templates. So let's dig into them. The first one is column referencing. Okay, so what this means is we've got table A with 4 columns of data. We're going to call that table, we're going to get all 4. Now if we use the column reference, and this is using the hashtag or the pound sign or the waffle, whatever you want to call it, I'll call it hashtag. When you surround what would normally be a column callout, instead with these hashtags, we're going to reference what you've called out before. And we're only going to get column 3 from what you got before. So you got all 4 columns before, but now you just want number 3. And later, if you want column 4, you can just get column 4. And in this way, they're relational. What you got on the all the columns from table A before, now they make sense together in a meaningful way in our stories. So let's dig into why and how that's useful. So if I wanted to use a table A for this paragraph, first of all, I wouldn't use table A for this paragraph, but bear with me because I'm trying to illustrate a point. Here we've got the silhouette of table A appeared in the tavern doorway. Now if I did it this way, I would get the silhouette of a gnome female Gribbles she, and that is not what you want. So you'd have to structure this paragraph differently. So that you could use multiple tables, and that's what we used to do, and it worked well, but it had its limitations as well. Here we've used a table. Race appears in the tavern. We've used a separate table for pronoun, and we use a separate table for random name. The problem with continuity arises when you roll on all those and you get the silhouette of an elf that is a female, and her name is Frank. They don't match up, and that's not really what you're after all the time. So that's where column references come in. Here we can say, we can roll on table A before. Maybe we can hide it, and we'll get into that. We roll on table A, and we get all those results. And when we do it, we get gnome, female, Gribbles, she. Well, what we can do in our story template is we can put in what columns we want where. The silhouette of A, we want table A, column 1, there. And as we go through, you see I use different columns in different places to end up with something that makes sense. The silhouette of a gnome appeared in the tavern doorway, ringed in moonlight from the outside. She strides in and takes a seat next to you. The name's Gribbles, she says, as she motions for the bartender. And so all of these things, they make sense. So it's important to note that in order for that list to be populated, or if you reference something, you first have to call it. So you'll have to do a call out, and then you can reference all the columns that you called. But if you call it out, you don't want all of that crap showing up in your story. And that's where hidden things comes in. So we're going to skip around a little bit and jump down to hidden roles, because hidden roles apply to so many of these. So we'll just get it out of the way. So here we've got a table call out, and if we printed that, it would print all 4 from table A, all 4 columns. But hidden table call out, all we have to do is throw a question mark in front of our table name, and it will print nothing. But it still rolls on that table, and it still stores all those results somewhere that you can call them later with referenceable columns, or whatever you'll use it for. So as an example, here I'm illustrating, you've got a table named NPC. It's got 30 columns. It's got everything about an NPC. And when you roll on it, you get a complete NPC. But it would spit out 30 columns of data in your story, and you don't want that. So instead, you put a question mark in front of the table name, and it will print none of that. And then you can come in and say, I want NPC column 1, maybe that's the name, NPC column 7, column 3, pulled 26 coat off, and number 1 reach for the shades. And so you can make a story that makes sense. So hidden, it works with a lot of these things, works with regular vanilla callouts with the square brackets, with callout custom naming, which we'll get into shortly, internal rolling, and cross template callouts. So the easy part here is it's a question mark, and it goes before your table name that you're going to roll on. So that's hidden rolling. Callout custom naming. Super important to get this concept down because it is necessary for many of the other callouts and syntax that we have. So normally, if you're just going to use just the vanilla functionality of story templates, if you call a table and then later call it, it stores both those results tied together like Siamese twins. So if I call color and it comes out blue, and then later I call color again and it comes out yellow, and then later I reference it, I'll get blue yellow, and it's never what you want. So I need to go back previous. So here I've custom named. I've called color in between the semicolons, and I've gave it a custom name of eyes. I've called color again. I gave it a custom name of teeth. You could also refer to this as a storage name, but I call them custom names. And then later, when I want to get the color of eyes, I just reference my custom name eyes, and I get blue. Here's an illustrated example, kind of blown up for syntax. You can see how this can be powerful. We can have one table, we can name it for several people, and then as we go through our story template, it's so much easier when you're writing to know who you're writing about when you're referencing Vagrant column 4 or just Vagrant. And notice the table name that we're rolling on here is NPC. There's no internal brackets around that. It's inside the parent brackets on the outside. It's just within the semicolons. That's the table you're rolling on. And then after the second semicolon is your custom name. This works with column referencing and hidden results too. So here I have rolled on NPC, but I threw a question mark in the front, so it's not going to print in my resulting story. So I've custom named it bad guy, and later in my template I want the bad guy's name, which happens to live in column 2 of NPC. So I column reference the second column of bad guy, and I get Jimmy out of that. Call out internal rolling. All right, so this gets a little in the weeds, so bear with me. All right, so there's ways to get your data out and to get the roles, and in the past we have just nested many tables. So you'd have a race table, and then inside the race table you'd have a gender table, and inside the gender table you'd have name table, and that's great, but then you're tied to whatever was listed in that name table. And if it was a first and last name, if it was multiple columns, maybe they were in 2 columns or the same column, you couldn't separate those names. You were stuck with it. Whereas this way, you can drill down and say, race, gender, name, I've stored it in bartender here. And then you can reference those individually if you like. So if the elf female name was rolled on. And so you can see this is deterministic. With callout internal rolling, the results of the first tables we roll then determine the ultimate parent table we roll on. So when this computes, it'll go through and say, which race did we get? Okay, we got elf. Which gender did we get? We got female. All right, so we got elf female name is the name of the table I need to look for and roll on. So you'll have a table for elf female name, and it will then roll on that deterministically. And I've labeled it bartender here so that we can separate those names. Later we can say just the bartender's first name or just her last name, or we can just reference it as bartender and get everything. This is a little bit blown up so you can see how it works. It also works with the hidden results feature with the question mark in the front. Now call out internal referencing and call out internal column referencing. We're going to hit those both together because they're very similar. This is rolling on something based on something that you've rolled on before. So to get into that, here's an example that illustrates it. So let's say we've got this in our story template. You stumble upon and this is the first time we're rolling on the table race, settlement. The mayor and old, now we're going to reference what we rolled before on race, named, and here we're doing call out internal referencing. I want to take what I rolled before, I want to stick it in between these square brackets, and whatever came out on that roll before, I want to place it in those square brackets and roll on the resulting table. And in the example here, you can see why this is a powerful thing to use. If it rolled dwarf, it would be inserted in as dwarf name, and you might get, you stumble upon a dwarf settlement, the mayor, an old dwarf named Britkoff Stonefist. So it took dwarf and put it into the table as dwarf name, and it rolled on dwarf name to get you something that makes sense. This also works with column references. So you can put those column references right inside your square brackets, and it will roll on them if you need to. It says here if the 7th column of NPC was race, you could say I want that to be an elf name or whatever race name it was. I want it to roll on that table, and you can put them together. Here I've got an example at the bottom where there's alligator bracket reference and then a column reference, and those will resolve and it will roll on the resulting table, and here it would have rolled on human female name. Date calls, requested feature. Two ways you can do this. One is just date, and the other is FG date. Date will use the date from your computer system, and FG date will use the date from the Fantasy Grounds calendar. Of note, that it won't work with fantasy calendars. It's Gregorian, and perhaps that will come in the future, but for now, that's what we've got. Lots of formats fit where you see that green format tag. There's tons of them, and I'll jump into that on the next slide. So here are the examples. If the date is November 28th, 2021, which is a Sunday, there are lots of different ways you can format this. The 2-digit will give you a numerical representation of the month, whereas a 3-digit for the month will give you an alpha numeric version. Or if you spell out the word month, you see that it will actually spell out the entire month. There is an added one just for fun. Its format is just called Old School, and it will output as Sunday, the 28th of November, in the year of our Lord, 2021. Just for fun. That does not work with FG Date. FG Date has a little bit fewer options, but you can put these in the titles of your story template so you know when they were generated, or anywhere throughout your story to make them more robust. As a side note, if you get these formats wrong, or if you type in one that doesn't exist, it'll give you a message letting you know, and then it will give you all of these formats in the console of Fantasy Grounds, so you can pull that up and reference those. Cross-template referencing. This is my favorite. This is the coolest thing that we've got now with story templates, and it just blows the doors right off of the whole machine. So let's dig into it. So once again, we're going to work with our table that we've been working with, Table A, with 4 columns of data. In Story Template 1, we go ahead and do a cross-template callout. So we're going to roll on this for the first time. This is done with the squiggly brackets, and it's done with the same similar syntax that we've seen before, where we have a table name and then a custom name or a storage name. So table name in this case would be A, and we're going to put it in storage name B. Now, if we call that out inside of our story template, our first story template, we call it the parent story template or whatever generates that content, we'll get all 4 columns that will print them out. But they are stored somewhere safe and far away, up in the cloud, away outside of this story template where every other story template can go ahead and access that data. So we have story template 2. When we want to reference that, we just use squiggly brackets and our storage name, so in this case B, or our custom name. And when we do that, it will take it from the cloud and print all 4 columns. We can also column reference that. And inside our squiggly brackets, we can put our column reference for our custom name and column 4, and we will just get column 4. So this also works with the hidden feature with the question mark, which is super handy. You can have a parent template that has lots of these tables rolled on and hidden, and then you can pull them out in other story templates and tables. So with tables, these callouts, these cross-template references, you can nest them as deep as you like within tables. You can even put them in story template main titles. So if you're in your parent template, it's a city and it's got cities nearby, you can roll those on a cross-template callout, and then the story templates that you can click to generate the nearby cities, their name can come directly, all their details can come directly from the parent template as an example. And just as a quick run through an example of how this might work, we've got our parent or our first story template, wherever we're going to call out the original data. And we're going to roll on table NPC here. And we're using the same 4 columns. So here I've got my squiggly brackets, my colon. I'm hiding it. I don't want this printed. I'm rolling on NPC and I'm storing it in stranger. And in this template, we'll use a little bit of it. Ahead of you, a stranger column 1 walks into a tavern. But we might want to use this NPC in another story template, so we make a completely different one. And here we just start bringing out a bunch of data we rolled in the other story template. And we put together column 1, stranger column 4, stranger column 3. And then what we end up with when it prints is we get ahead of you, a gnome walks into the tavern. And that's in your first story template. You open a totally different story template and you can still get all of her data, and you can have Gribbles inside that tavern. The next couple of things are small, but they really do make things a little bit smoother in your story templates, and they're pretty easy to use. Indefinite article processing is what we'll dive into first. And what is an indefinite article, if you don't know, it's just a or an. And there's a lot of rules that go around which one gets used for proper English. So with indefinite article processing, you can tell your story template to basically read what is coming out and try to make an intelligent decision on whether it should be a or an. So here I'll just read, if a rolled result follows an indefinite article, like a, you wrap that article in parentheses in the story template, and it will attempt to swap it for what it should be. So here's an example. Let's say in our story template, I've got A and I've wrapped it in parentheses, meaning I don't know what animal is going to roll. I don't know what's going to come out of there. Should it be A or should it be an? I don't know. So A, and I've put these parentheses around to tell the story template, hey, check this after it rolls and make sure it's the right indefinite article. A animal ran away from A, and here I've used a lowercase a, animal. And you might get an octopus ran away from a walrus. Or, if you rolled it again, a seal ran away from an eagle. And so it will take a look at that and make it flow and just be better structured, and it'll do its best to do that. If you can use a capital A or a lowercase a with this, and it will keep it whatever case you've put it. So if it's at the beginning of a sentence, as done here in the example for the template, use a capital A and put it in the parentheses, and then it will take a look at the next word after and attempt to match it based on the rules that it has. Intelligent auto capitalization. So this is another thing to make your resulting stories just look better and flow smoother and it's nice. So it'll once again read it and try to fix incorrect capitalization. Now you have to kind of, just like with indefinite articles, you have to kind of show it where to look. But if you've got something in a table that, as it says here, can easily begin a whole sentence, and commonly does, like these words here, like he, she, his, and her. They can be in the middle of a sentence, or they can begin it, and a lot of times they do. You take the first letter of whatever word it is that you're not sure might be capitalized or not, and you put it inside those parentheses. So in table A, I've got column 3 and column 4. I've got he and his, and I don't know if he and his are going to start sentences or not. So I went ahead and put that first letter of that word in parentheses, and that tells story templates to take a look at that word and see if there was some punctuation before it. Is this the beginning of a sentence? So when it prints out, so what we would write in our story template is, the wind hurt A column 4 eyes. A column 3 covered them with A column 4 hands, and column 4 time was up. And when it prints, as long as I've got them in my table with those parentheses around the first letter, I'll get something like this. The wind hurt his eyes. His, not capitalized here. It's in the middle of a sentence. But he covered them. He starts a sentence, so it went ahead and capitalized it with his hands, not capitalized again. But the next his, on his time, story template, it took a look in the table. I've got parentheses around that first letter, so it says, okay, let me look what happened before this letter. There was a period. I should probably capitalize this result. And so it did. And his time was up is now capitalized. And this only works if it follows punctuation. It's not magical. It's running on computing power here. So it's looking for those to determine whether it should capitalize it or not. So if you don't have those and you would like it capitalized, you can put a period. You can sneak a period in somewhere before. That's what I've done in some of my templates. So. And the very last thing, table column limit is 30 now. It used to be 20. And the reason why this is so important is because now when we've got column referencing, you can reap benefits from giant columned tables. So this is an example, and I understand that it's shrunk for this presentation, so it's tough to read. But here I've got an NPC table, and the first column is race, second column gender, first name, last name, nickname, he or she, his or her, him or her, his or hers, trait, attitude, hair, eyes, voice, tattoo, clothes, background, weapon, wants, fears, color 1, color 2, minute details, symbols, a pet, religion, religion any, a religion good, a religion bad, a quirk, and I even left a couple that were blank. This is wonderful, and I can pick from these things to determine certain traits about an NPC that I want. I can roll on it, and maybe I get a dwarf male, and I don't need to use all this data. I can hide it, and then I can cherry pick what I would like to have. If I want this specific NPC to be, known by the color of their clothes, then I could pick one of those colors and just use it when I talk about that NPC. And I use names and NPCs a lot in this presentation just so that we're kind of on the same playing field, and it's understandable from topic to topic. But this could be used from anything from a MacGuffin to a whole campaign setting to a building or a castle or anything really. So you don't have to use this many columns, but now you at least have the ability to if you would like to. And that concludes the presentation for story templates. I hope that this presentation had some value for you, and good luck out there in making some amazing generators and story templates.